19 days before her sister married the man Gillian Hartwell had once married, she walked into the Barton Pediatric Clinic on a Tuesday afternoon with Maisie's health card in her coat pocket, and was told, with a kind of careful politeness that made it worse, that her name had been removed from her daughter's emergency contact file. The receptionist looked down at the counter when she said it. Gillian kept her eyes level and asked quietly, who had made the change? That was when she saw Drina. Her younger sister was standing at the far end of the waiting area, with a pale green tote over one arm, and the expression she always wore when she was about to perform for a room. Drina Hartwell was 34 years old, and had spent most of her life being the version of their family that strangers found easy to approve of. She did not perform badly under pressure. She performed very well. She works rotating shifts at the hospital, Drina said, and her voice carried across the small waiting room without appearing to try. She's been in counseling for 2 years. She's not always available. I'm just here to make sure Maisie gets to her appointment. 2 other families in the waiting area went still. Gillian did not look at them. She asked the woman at the desk if she could speak with the clinic administrator. Pam Dietrich ran the front office at Barton Pediatric with the unhurried efficiencies of someone who had seen everything twice. She was not unkind and she was not easily rattled, and when she came out from the back office, she took in the room's temperature in about 4 seconds. She asked both women to step away from the desk. She asked to see the original registration forms. A file like Maisie's had layers. The contact card kept at the front, laminated, current, was the one showing Drina's name. But the intake folder from when Gillian had enrolled Maisie as a patient 3 years earlier, the one she had filled out in her own hand on a Wednesday morning, while Maisie chewed the end of a crayon in the seat beside her, was still in the cabinet behind the desk. Pam pulled it herself. Gillian's name was on every line it was supposed to be on. Drina's name was on none of them. Pam turned the laminated card over. Clipped to the back, folded once, was a set of documents. She read. Gillian watched her face while she did, and she watched the careful professional expression change, not to alarm exactly, but to the stillness that precedes it. Pam set the papers down. She looked at Gillian, then at Drina, and then she stepped to the side door that led to the treatment rooms and told her colleague to please keep Maisie settled in with the doctor until further notice. I need both of you to stay where you are, she said, in the register people use when they have already decided what comes next. She picked up the phone. The documents clipped behind the laminated card were not a contact update. There was a substitute decision-maker designation form, the form used in Ontario to transfer healthcare authority from a parent to another named person. There was an affidavit bearing what appeared to be a notary seal, claiming Gillian had consented to the transfer. There was a school records transfer request, addressed to a board in a different district, 25 minutes east of where Maisie currently attended. And at the bottom of the designation form, in the space reserved for the parent's signature, was a name that was supposed to be Gillian's. She had not signed any of it. The forms were dated to take effect on the 14th of May. 3 days before the wedding. Gillian had been a health records technician at Hamilton General for 8 years. She worked rotating shifts, which sounded to people unfamiliar with the schedule like a kind of disorder. The truth was the opposite. Rotating shifts required a discipline of planning that most people never had to develop. She knew her hours 2 months in advance. She arranged Maisie's life around them with the precision of someone who understood that a single missed handoff could undo an entire week. Her work had also taught her something she had not understood she was absorbing until the day she needed it. She charted for a living. She noted times because times mattered. She kept copies because copies were the only thing that survived a dispute. And she backed up files automatically because she had watched colleagues lose arguments they should have won simply because the original had been misplaced. Maisie was 6. She had her mother's habit of focus and her father's eyes, and she had developed over the course of her short life, a strong preference for drawing that had resulted in roughly 400 pieces of paper taped to various surfaces throughout their apartment on Fennell Avenue. Every morning before school or clinic, or wherever the day was sending them, Jillian drew a small animal on the back of Maisie's left hand in washable marker. A rabbit, a cat, a fish with a crooked tail. It was their private arrangement. Maisie checked for it the moment she woke up, and if it wasn't there yet, she would bring Gillian the marker without being asked. That morning it had been a hedgehog. Maisie had examined the quills with professional seriousness before approving them. The marriage had ended in November of 2022, the way those endings come. All at once, through something small. A name on a phone screen. A pause 2 seconds too long. The person Colin Ferris had been drifting toward was Gillian's younger sister. Drina had held Maisie in the hospital the week she was born. She had driven Gillian to prenatal appointments when Colin was traveling. She had sat across from her in kitchens and coffee shops for 30 years, and been, in all the ways that counted, her sister. Gillian had understood, in the aftermath, that she would never be able to trace exactly when the loving had become the wanting. She had stopped trying. What she kept was the date the pretense ended, and she held on to it because it was the only thing that belonged entirely to her. The divorce finalized in the spring of 2024. Gillian kept primary physical custody. Colin had Maisie on alternate weekends and shared legal decision-making authority, which was supposed to mean they agreed on the large things. In practice, it meant he had already signed a lease with Drina by the time the ink dried. Her parents, her father, Gordon Hartwell in particular, had decided that the kindest reading of the situation was the one that did not require them to be angry at Drina. Her mother, Eloise, operated in the softer register of worry. She brought it to phone calls in the form of questions about Gillian's schedule and her counseling, and about the sleep medication Gillian had mentioned once, during a weak moment, wanting her mother to be her mother. She had handed Eloise those things because she trusted her. Her mother kept them the way you keep useful things. Welcome back to Mr. Nathaniel Stories. If earned justice and family loyalty are what keep you here, drop a comment below and subscribe before we go any further, because what happens next is the part that changes everything. In the months after the divorce, Drina had made herself useful in the way that someone does when they are mapping terrain. She texted to ask which afternoons were hardest, which days Gillian had nobody to cover. She offered more than once to accompany their mother to the clinic on Maisie's appointment days. Just to help, just in case. Gillian had said no each time. But she had answered the texts. She had told her sister more than she'd intended to, because she was tired, and because part of her still wanted to believe a person could do something unforgivable, and still be, in the smaller ways, your sister. What those clinic visits had actually been, she understood later. Drina learning which nurse managed Maisie's file. Drina watching who signed the forms and how. Drina learning the layout of the front desk, the rhythm of the slowest afternoons. It had not been family support, it had been reconnaissance, and Gillian had thanked her for it. The constable who responded to Pam Dietrich's call was professional and unhurried. Constable Hewitt set Gillian's documents and Drina's documents side by side on the administrator's desk and went through them methodically, which told Gillian he was taking it seriously. Her sister rebuilt her expression into something concerned and measured. "She's been struggling," Drina said to him, rather than to Gillian. "The rotating shifts, the counseling. I only wanted to make sure Maisie had someone stable. This has gotten entirely out of hand." Gillian let the words settle without answering them. She had learned that the best response to a performance was not to applaud and not to boo, but simply to be the quieter thing in the room. Constable Hewitt asked whether she had the original registration documents at home. She did, she had copies of everything. He wrote it down, he told her to bring whatever she had. Maisie was released into her mother's care, because the original intake form said what it said. On the drive home, Maisie tucked her hand into Gillian's coat pocket the way she always did in the cold, And after a few minutes she said, in the easy way children announce things that have been sitting in their chest for a while. Mum, Auntie Drina showed me a room at her and Daddy's house. She said, it's going to be mine. She said I don't have to tell you yet, because it's a surprise. Jillian looked at the road ahead. Did she? She said. There's a little desk, Maisie said, and a lamp with a star on it. Jillian kept her hands steady on the wheel and her voice easy for the entire drive. She was very good at that. She had been practicing for 8 years. The calls began that evening. Her mother first, soft-toned and worried in the wrong direction. Then an aunt. Then a cousin, who sent a photo of Drina at what appeared to be a dress fitting. Not one of them asked what had been clipped to the back of that contact card. Jillian sat on the kitchen floor after the third call and let herself feel the weight of it. That was the part she didn't often admit to. When the people you grew up loving tell you, collectively and without apparent cruelty, that you are the problem, some small and tired part of you begins looking for the version of events that lets you stay in the family. She sat there and she let herself feel how much she still wanted her mother to be her mother. Then Yale came. Yale Oben had been her friend since before the divorce, and she had a way of being present that required no preamble. She sat down on the kitchen floor without being asked, and did not say that everything would be fine. Back up everything tonight, she said, before you call any of them back. If someone in your family has ever handed you honesty as a gift and watched it turned into a weapon, you already know the feeling she was sitting with on that floor. If you know it, leave one word in the comments. I read them, and stay with this story, because the quiet is about to speak. That was when Gillian remembered the security notification she had received 3 weeks earlier. A clinic portal alert telling her that Maisie's file had been accessed from an unrecognized device. She had been halfway through a night shift, running on 4 hours of sleep, and she had told herself it was a glitch. She had taken a screenshot, as she always did, and set the thought aside. She found the screenshot in 40 seconds. It had never been a glitch. What Gillian brought to Constable Hewitt 4 days later was the following. The original intake form, in her own handwriting, showing her as sole emergency contact and sole guardian. The clinic portal's access log, showing Maisie's file had been modified from an unrecognized device at 11:43 on a Thursday night. Her hospital shift records, showing she had clocked in at 7:06 that same evening and had not left the building until the following morning. She had been on the floor at 11:43, logging medications and answering call lights for people who would never know her name, while someone elsewhere sat at a keyboard and quietly rearranged her daughter's life. She could not have made that change. She had a time clock that did not negotiate. She had also noticed, because she worked with records for a living, and could not stop noticing, that the commission number printed beneath the notary seal on the affidavit did not correspond to any active registration she could locate in the provincial database. She found the notary by name through the public directory. Her name was Morna Teague, and she lived 2 towns east of Hamilton. Gillian called her and explained carefully what she had found. Morna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's my old seal. My commission lapsed in 2021. I have never met you. I have never met your sister, and there is no record of this on my end." Someone copied it. She agreed without hesitation to put her statement in writing. Then Gillian did the comparison she had been putting off, because she already suspected the answer and did not want to be right. The SDM designation had 2 signature lines. The one bearing her name was wrong in the way forgeries are always wrong, drawn rather than written, each letter carefully placed instead of reflexively made. She had not studied her own signature in years, but she lived inside it, and this was not it. The second line was Collins. She had signed a marriage license beside it. She had signed divorce papers across from it. She knew the particular lean of the letters, the way he never finished the last character. She recognized it the way you recognize a voice. It was real. He had signed it willingly. Her name had been drawn onto the line beside his. She understood then what those autumn clinic visits had really been. Drina watching who signed the intake forms and where. Drina watching what real looked like, so she could learn what close enough might pass for. Jillian sat with that understanding for a long time. Then she put everything in the folder. She made 3 copies before Saturday. One in the folder she would bring. One in the cloud. One emailed to her family lawyer, Deborah Lim, on Friday afternoon. A plain message with 7 attachments, sent before she could change her mind. Deborah Lim had said 2 things she held on to. Don't overstate what you cannot personally prove, and let the people whose job it is to carry the legal weight carry it. Your job is the record. Jillian's job was the record. That had been a strange relief. She had been trying to be a lawyer and a detective, and a mother simultaneously. She had permission to just be the mother. On the drive to her parents' house on Saturday evening, she nearly turned around twice. Not from fear, from grief. There was a version of that house she still loved, one that existed before she knew what she knew, and she felt its absence the way you feel a tooth that is gone. She let herself feel it for the length of one red light. Then the light changed, and she kept driving. Her father, Gordon, was at the head of the table. Her mother, Eloise, was at the stove. Drina and Colin were there, and Colin's mother, Bernadette Ferris, who had driven up from Brantford and who was clearly not fully informed about what the evening was meant to accomplish. A form and a pen sat waiting at Jillian's place. Drina opened the door. "Just sign it," she said. "Then we can eat." Jillian set her coat on the chair. She put the folder on the table. She did not pick up the pen. "Before I sign anything," she said, "I'd like to open this." Her father made the sigh of a man exercising patience with a difficult child. She had expected it. She set the original intake form on the table and explained, in the measured voice she used to brief incoming staff at the start of a shift, that she was the sole guardian listed on every line of Maisie's clinic file from the day of registration, and that her sister's name appeared on none of them. "There was a mix-up at the clinic," Drina said, easy and steady, already moving toward the door of the conversation. Jillian placed the portal access log beside the intake form. Then the badge record. "My account was accessed from an unknown device at 11:43 on a Thursday night," she said. "Here is the access log. Here is my hospital clock-in record for that same shift, 7:06 p.m. She set the page beside it. "I was on the floor at 11:43. I was doing my job. The same job you've been telling people proves I'm unavailable, while someone sat at a keyboard and edited my daughter out of my care. I could not have made that change. I was somewhere else, documented, with colleagues who saw me." The temperature in the room shifted. Her mother turned slowly from the stove. "The SDM designation has a notary seal," Jillian continued. "The notary is named Morna Teague. She has never met me, she never notarized this document, and the commission number beneath her stamp expired in 2021. She will say so to anyone who asks." She set Morna's statement on the table. "You didn't update a contact card, Drina. You copied a licensed professional's credential and used it to make a fraudulent document look like something the law had blessed." Drina's voice moved faster than she wanted it to. "I was trying to help. Maisie needs." Jillian placed the last 2 pages side by side and turned them so everyone at the table could see. "There are 2 signatures on this form," she said. "This one is supposed to be mine." She touched it lightly. "It isn't, someone drew it." She moved her hand. "This one is Colin's. It's real." The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when a fact has been set down that cannot be argued around. Bernadette Ferris was sitting directly across from her son. She put both hands flat on the table. "Colin." Her voice was very controlled. "What is it that you signed?" He looked at the table. He looked at his mother. He looked at nothing in particular. When he finally spoke, it was in the tone of someone who has decided his own authority will carry him through. "I'm her father," he said. "I have rights." "You have shared legal custody," Jillian said. "Which means we make the significant decisions together." It does not mean you sign a form to transfer your daughter out of her mother's home, and then allow someone to trace my signature on the line beside yours." Her voice did not waver. "If you wanted to revisit the custody arrangement, there was a legal process for that. You chose this instead, because this would have been completed before anyone could object." Bernadette's chair scraped back. She stood, one hand still on the table, and looked at her son with an expression Jillian recognized, the expression of a person finding a stranger in a familiar face. "I raised you better than this," she said. He did not answer her either. Drina made one more attempt to claim the room. "You are twisting everything," she said. "I love that little girl." "I know you do," Jillian said. "And she meant it. That's what I can't get past. You love her, and you still built this. Because for you, those have always been part of the same motion, loving something and deciding it should be yours." She turned to her parents and she made herself slow down, because this part required care. "You gave Drina my schedule," she said. "You told the clinic I was unstable. You handed her the fact that I'm in counseling, wrapped in your concern, believing you were protecting your granddaughter. I believe that. I do." She paused. "But you didn't forge this signature, you didn't copy that seal. You didn't sign this form. She let you think you were helping while she built something criminal underneath you. She used you too." Her father's face had gone the color of old paper. He looked at Drina the way a person looks at something that has changed its shape. "You told me it was just paperwork," Gordon said, his voice very low. "You said she needed help." Eloise had a hand over her mouth. Jillian laid the last document on the table, the SDM form, dated the 14th of May, 3 days before the wedding, and beside it, face up, a photograph she had saved to her phone the previous week. Drina had sent it herself, probably without thinking of it as anything significant. It showed the corner of a small room, a child's bed, a lamp with a star pattern, and on the wall, at eye height for a 6-year-old, a wooden nameplate. It read Maisie Ferris. Not Hartwell, not hyphenated. Her mother's name erased, her father's name, soon to become her aunt's as well, stamped in its place. "You weren't picking her up for an afternoon," Jillian said. "You were relocating her, so that by the time anyone stood in front of a judge, she would already be there. A room, a school, a routine, and the woman you'd been calling unstable would be outside, trying to prove she wasn't." The silence settled and held. Drina's composure left her all at once. "If you were a better mother," she said, and her voice had gone low and hard, "you wouldn't need counseling in the first place." The table did not respond. The words sat in the air where everyone could see them for exactly what they were. Not concern, not love for a child, not anything it had ever been dressed as. Just the oldest wound repurposed. The thing she had been holding for years, finally said out loud, in her own voice, in front of witnesses. Jillian looked at her sister for a moment. "I'm in counseling because of you," she said. "Because of what you and Colin did. You broke something, and then you pointed at the fact that I was mending it and called it proof that I was broken." She gathered her documents back into the folder, one page at a time. "How any of you see my daughter from this point forward is my decision. The originals are with my lawyer and with the police." This stopped being a family conversation the day someone drew my name on a form instead of asking me to sign it. She left without eating. The wedding did not happen. She had not stopped it. She had not posted the photograph of the nameplate. She had not sent anything to the family group chat. She had put the truth on the table in the order it occurred, and let it be heavier than the version her family had found more comfortable to believe. Bernadette Ferris cancelled the venue herself. Jillian heard about it through Yale, who had heard it from someone else. She felt no particular satisfaction. She felt something quieter and more durable than satisfaction. The investigation ran its course without her directing it. The forged notary credential was not, Constable Hewitt confirmed, a gray area under the criminal code. The copied seal, the drawn signature, the fraudulent affidavit, all of it was documented and attributed. Colin's real signature on a fraudulent relocation form carried its own legal implications, particularly for the existing custody arrangement. The SDM designation was voided before it could take effect. The school transfer application was withdrawn by the receiving board after the investigation flagged the originating forms. On the 14th of May, Maisie woke up in her own bed. Jillian made egg toast, the kind with a hole for the yolk, and drew a small fox on the back of Maisie's hand before school. It was a Tuesday. They had a clinic appointment in 2 weeks. Maisie's file had been corrected. Her mother's name was restored to every line it belonged on. A note in the system, placed by Pam Dietrich's office, flagged the file for in-person identity verification before any future modification could be processed. About 2 weeks after the dinner, Eloise came to Gillian's door. She came with nothing in her hands, no casserole, no explanation rehearsed into smoothness. She said she had believed the easier story, because believing it had not required her to accept what her younger daughter was capable of, and that she was ashamed, and that she understood if Gillian needed distance. Gillian opened the door partway. "I'm not cutting you out," she said, "but I will not let anyone else decide what I am to Maisie. If you want to be in her life, it starts with the truth, every single time." Her mother said she understood. Time would tell whether she did. Gillian kept her counseling appointments. If anything, she attended with more steadiness now. Not because she had come apart, but because she had proved to herself that asking for help was not a vulnerability anyone got to hold over her. It was the record of a woman who had decided, in a difficult season, to stay whole. There was a Tuesday morning in late May, ordinary in all the ways mornings can be ordinary, when Gillian walked Maisie into the clinic instead of dropping her at the entrance. She had the day off. Maisie liked it when she came inside. The updated contact card was at the front of the file now, reprinted, laminated clean. Maisie stopped in front of the desk on the way to the treatment hallway, the way she always stopped in front of anything with letters on it, and she traced the name slowly with one finger, the way her mother had taught her. Left to right, patient, without rushing. "That's you," she said. "Mum." "That's me," Gillian said. One name on that card. Nothing clipped behind it. Nothing face down. Nothing that would make a careful person reach for a telephone. Just a single name in the space where it had always belonged, and where it was going to stay. Maisie checked the fox on the back of her hand before they went through the door, running her thumb across it the way she always did to make sure it hadn't faded overnight. It was still clear. She smiled at it, satisfied, and pushed the door open ahead of her mother. She had stopped asking, sometime in the past few weeks, whether Gillian would be there in the morning. The asking had simply, gradually, without announcement, stopped. The way fear stops when enough mornings pass and the person you needed is there for every single one of them. Not because they swore it. Not because they explained it. Because they were there.